All right, so this is the 8th community dialogue, and we are discussing governing structure for the study group. Joe.
Yes, and I just want to share that we've just gone through 3 rounds of breakouts talking about our personal experiences with the study group, what is working for us in terms of the environments that we've been in. And then we've had some great discussions about what makes us feel alive as leaders and how we can bring that to Earth regeneration work. And I know in my own group, we had a beautiful diversity and intimacy of sharing within that particular breakout group. And then in the 3rd round, we had a discussion of tools, frameworks for making decisions and governing that work well, that we might bring into this network. And so that's the summary of the arc of our conversation. What I'd love to do now is just invite everyone who feels like sharing, anyone who feels like sharing, to take a minute or 2 of sharing. We have about a little more than 15 minutes of time left. So we have time for several people to share. And before you do start sharing, I just want to name that I'm very honored that Diego has stepped into a self-directed leadership role in facilitating these community dialogues, and that we're actually working to create support structures for this emergence of leadership. So this isn't an idle conversation. We really intend to do our best to make this happen together with all of you. So by sharing today in these conversations, you're helping to build this capacity, and you are being a leader by doing that. And so I just want to name and acknowledge that for everyone. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts of what do you see as governing structure for this? Yeah. Please, Diego.
Sorry, Joe, I just want to share, because people are asking me for the Google document link. And yeah, so that's the link to the Google document where people were taking notes. As some people might leave, I also want to share, and then we'll open the discussion, the link to the web form for people interested in the training, about mutual training, actually, about the community regenerators, which is part of this discussion. So we are trying to build a pool of facilitators that help the study group organized around working groups, bi-regional groups, and also encourage leadership to emerge, a diverse leadership to emerge. And maybe we'll say something more at the end of the call, but I wanted to share in case people have to leave.
Yeah, thank you. So anyone who hasn't filled out that survey but is interested in potentially taking this course, the course is free. It will not cost any money, but we're going to have a limited number of people that are allowed in just to have the right group size. And so we encourage you to fill this out. We'll be announcing the details of the program in a few weeks' time. But for now, we'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections about governing structures for the Earth Regenerators study group, if anyone would like to share.
Oh, I'd be happy to start us off.
Please, Ross, go ahead.
Okay. So I maybe pull one thing from the first conversation that we had. So I was talking with Mike and PJ, who were both, they were saying that they're fairly new members to the group, and noting a kind of, in some ways, what you'd name, Joe, a sort of centralized structure to it at the moment, because you're giving the webinars. And I was just sharing my experience over time being in the group, that like seeing, for example, Diego put himself forward and say, this is something that I would like to do. And I've seen other instances of that within the group, which I think is really healthy, that if someone expresses an enthusiasm for something, to let them know that they're supported in pursuing that enthusiasm. And I think that as a kind of, you know, as a behavioral thing, if that continues, so, you know, from each leader that they're then saying to other people, yes, you have, you know, go with that.
All the wonderful people here today. Okay, breathe in.
Whoa, we're gonna
breathe out.
Where's that coming from?
I
recognize this voice.
Yeah, that's a recording of the last webinar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we take a breath? Just, yeah.
I'm having an out-of-body experience. I'm going to take a deep breath.
Hang on, Z. Okay, so I think I've finished with that. The other thing was, so I wanted to pick up from the conversation I had with Ellen and JP. Yeah, which was around sort of different notions of leadership. Ellen, I hope you don't mind me saying you were expressing that you don't feel like a natural leader, and yet what she described sounds to me like very good leadership, which is, you know, recognizing when to put other people forward, when to step back yourself as well. Yeah. Okay, those are the main things I'd like to share.
Thank you, Ross. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll share if somebody, or Chad, were you going to? Hi, everybody, it's Tara. I wanted to, we were talking in our group about how important transparency and accountability is alongside humor. How humor makes everything better. But we had some interesting dialogue about how to keep things transparent and accountable. And a couple of things were brought up, which I thought I'd toss out there. One was Lila June's 7 Generations New Deal, and the other was, and Chad can maybe talk about this a little bit more, was sociocracy as a platform of clarifying goals and intentions. So transparency and maybe cohesive goals. That's all I got.
Yeah, I can also just make a little plug for sociocracy. I think somebody mentioned it before. It's a way of making decisions, and it's a process that's very well designed, and I use it as part of a group that I'm part of, a local currency called Common Good. And so I don't want to give a sociocracy lesson, but the idea is that it goes in rounds, and each round moves from clarifying question to a reaction discussion, and then a consent period. Not actually a consensus period, but a consent period. And I just find it very effective. And there's a lot of work that's gone into it. And there are other models out there too, like liquid democracy. There's a lot going for it. I guess the greater point here is when we're talking about governance, whether we're talking about a collective way of acting and creating rules, making decisions, creating boundaries around the community, and managing conflicts, resolving conflicts. So when it comes to our group here, we have to ask ourselves, what's the purpose and what's the nature of decisions and the things that we're trying to achieve, and the governance structure will be shaped around that, rather than deciding, oh, this system's cool, so let's plug that in. So I always have to return to the purpose and identity of the community.
Yeah, very important. Don't have a hammer looking for nails.
Yeah, I think I could just throw forward a key point that emerged from my discussion with Simona and Ellen. It's that everyone's everyone should be made to feel that their perspective is valued. Solidarity circles are an interesting mechanism for looking at this, in which everyone shares their experience in a round. So everyone is given the experiential sense that what they have to say is valued. And rather than being debated or reacted to, what is spoken is simply allowed to exist as the expression of that individual. And perhaps that approximates true democracy a little bit better than the representational forms that we are so used to in this country.
Thank you, Max. Are there other, would either Simona or Ellen like to add to that, or anyone else make a contribution?
I will. From here in Australia, I was just in a meeting this past week with the New Economy Network, and we had a guest speaker who is one of the First Nations people here. And she said something so provocative for me when discussing the leadership that is, indigenous to this massive group of diverse subgroups, right? And how they do things. And she emphasized so many times that it really woke me up. She said, this is not a democracy. This is not how we do it. And it was just so fascinating to me to go, right, we assume so many underpinning assumptions of what those structures should be. That really made me take a deep breath and go, okay, wow, what structure that's not democratic could work? Fascinating. Anyway, I just wanted to offer that in.
Yeah. I immediately had a thought about that of if we democratically agree to all piss in our drinking water, is that what should have happened? I just thought. Speaking of humor.
But I think the sociocracy model may be more similar to what they do. I don't know. Because she didn't go into that, except she said, what she did say, which was really fascinating, was that citizen assemblies, what we would call citizen assemblies, is much more like how there was 65,000 years of continuous, basically, preservation of culture and support and harmony among people. So that was really fascinating for me.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying that, JP, I remember being told that they would take weeks. Like it was almost like as long as it took to talk something through and get to the bottom of it, whereas we've got quite used to, like a time-limited meeting, let's conclude this. It was just a different understanding of what was important. So when the thing you're trying to achieve is more important than the time you take to do it.
I just want to share, sorry, Anita, it's related to this discussion that yesterday there was this webinar by Lila June that was named before about indigenous governance, and Vivek actually, as he usually does also for Joe's webinar, took some notes, and I'm gonna share the file here, so if people are interested they can go through it.
Thank you, Diego.
Thank you, Diego.
So about indigenous groups, I did watch that yesterday, and I'm thinking very strongly that we're dealing with people who know each other over their lifetimes. They are place-based. I don't think we can just take what belongs to that setting and say we can use it in this worldwide. We don't know each other and we're everywhere. So we really need to say, in what ways can we be place-based and know each other in long, committed ways? My own project, I just say I have failed, but a piece of it is that nobody that I come into contact with understands long-term commitment. but just, we do this, we move on. There's a whole lot of that in this group. Is there any other way to be in a group like this? Or does this group, is it specialized to be able to generate those kinds of groups?
Yeah, maybe is a good opportunity to speak to that question in the context of the webinar, because the webinar was about creating a design school, which had a kind of a thematic element that could be taught online, or learning could happen online as part of it. And there was a place-based learn from the land component, very much cannot be done online. And I mentioned that we're working to create something like a design school in Barichara that people can come to say that there will be an example. This isn't the only example, but this will be one of the examples of a place-based project. And so I think it's really important for us to create clarity around the different governing models for those different contexts. And that'll be something we'll figure out over time, because it's not a one size fits all. It's an extremely important point, Anita, that you're bringing up. And I see Amber has raised her hand. So
hi, Joe.
Amber, would you like to share this? Thank you.
Yes, I would love to speak to this. Thank you so much for bringing up this topic. I'm not sure the name of the woman who just said that it's important not to just look at a one size fits all and to be sensitive of appropriation. As an Indigenous person, I'm seeing that more and more people are saying, coming from this perspective, and I really appreciate it. In the work that I've been researching is very much the adaptation of how do you have an Indigenous perspective in terms of economics. We personally, from my understanding, we don't agree with the notion of selling water. We don't think that the water particularly appreciates being sold. So how do you have everyone's needs being met? And what I found has been very helpful is this term called intergenerational equity. So this is innate wealth that exists throughout time that is sacred. It is a birthright, and it is a heritage. And it is less about transaction than it is about relationship. Mm-hmm. So I think when we're thinking about governance and how do you determine governance models, from what I've understood, that a society can be defined in three ways. How do you teach? How do you share? And how do you judge? Those are the three dynamics that are generally at play. And if we look at that governance through the lens of relationships rather than transactions, from an Indigenous perspective of the forest is our library, it is our church, it is our hospital. How do we have experiences of that and experiences of wisdom and knowledge that integrates or respects these perspectives? So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Amber, for bringing that in. This is a major point of focus for Earth regeneration, is a reframing of humans by all who have been fed this delusion, to reframe away from thinking we're separate from nature and instead see ourselves as nature acting. And like the phrase, the turn of phrase, designing for nature to becoming designing as nature. Or designing with nature becomes designing as nature. And it's a deep metaphysical shift. And so I think this is an extremely important piece of the puzzle. Also, we have two people raising their hands, and we're getting close to time. So let's make time for both of these two, and then we'll wrap up after, but we might go 5 minutes later, so if that's okay. And who has raised their hand? Okay, I see Diogo's raised your hand. So Diogo, would you like to share?
Yes. Just like what could make the difference between an organization and an organism, and being a distributed organism where if there's a problem with one part, like the others are autonomous, they continue working. So yeah, and the long-term perspective of regeneration, right? You don't see the end. It's not like, oh yeah, it's 5 years, no, it's 10 years, no, it's lifelong job, dedication, you know. You can think for 7 generations, yeah. So yeah, having this perspective, it's I think important for having a common thinking or view for the organism. This could be maybe the DNA. Okay, thanks. That was it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Diego. I think it's really important to recognize that life has existed continuously on this planet for at least 3.5 billion years. So we should get over the hubris of our own egos and thinking that this is about us, and recognizing that we are continuing a line that needs to go way beyond us in time. And so there's a real need for that shift in perception. It's really a perception shift as well as a metaphysical shift.
It looks like Joe is frozen or he's having connection problems.
Yep.
Yeah,
Was
okay.
that the only one dropped?
Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah, for like a minute.
Yeah, the Zoom just shut down on me. Sorry about that. But yeah, just to start a wrap up of this conversation with a momentary delay there, is that if we're going to be early generators, we need to learn how to regenerate each other. And so we need to learn how to be life flows as supports across long periods of time. Whether that's an online community or a mobile app on a smartphone is a question that reveals how that's the wrong question. It's really how do we as human beings support each other to become supporters of this biosphere that we're a part of, for the part of humanity that continues for 200 years in the future, 500 years, 1,000 years, and beyond. So I just would like to say thank you all for this wonderful conversation today. This is going to help inform my thinking. I let Diego, you can speak to this for your own perspective. It's very helpful for me to have these conversations as we're thinking of the training and as we're thinking of the next steps for the network, because I'm already feeling that we're at information overload, that I've sort of given everyone too much information to process in any reasonable sequence. So much more important is to create cohorts of collaboration to support each other's learning, which will go deeper into nonlinear and emergent patterns of learning than what I've been able to present as the person who keeps posting new content. And so this new way of decentralized governing is going to become extremely important as we're dealing with more information than anyone should process in a reasonable amount of time, so that we can do the actual work of regenerating the earth and not spend all of our time reading stuff or watching videos. You see, like there's this disconnect that's really a big deal. So I look forward to co-creating with all of you in the next steps. And I'd love to pass it over to just maybe share a word or two about the survey and the training. Does that sound okay to you, Diego, or would you rather I speak?
Sure. Yes, thanks, Joe. And so I'll share again the post on the website where if you want to take part to the mutual training. It's called mutual because we will try to teach each other. Already in this sharing, many people had the chance to speak about practices that they have experienced or facilitated. So we'll try to make it the most collaborative that we can, and there will need some competency-based part of it, of course. And so we'll keep this open for a couple of weeks, and then at the beginning of August we'll send a message to the people that we think we can involve in this first training that will start mid-September until mid-October, more or less, for a month. But it will be a continuous learning process. So, and I'm sure there will be other times where new cohort of facilitators will have a chance to learn together then in the future.
Yep, so we look forward to continuing learning with all of you. Thank you for being here and for these lovely discussions. And now
Goodbye.
we'll say, enjoy the rest of the day, be well, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Everybody. Nice to chat with everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.